I'm really pleased to introduce our visiting speaker today, Laura Hopes. Laura is an artist, writer and researcher whose work explores a complex and often fragile relationship between land and people. Hi, Debbie. Laura describes herself as a vulnerable practitioner, a position that allows her to draw upon multiple forms of knowledge and embrace uncertainty as part of her creative and ethical process. Her research focuses on the intertwined histories of climate change and colonisation, particularly as they manifest through agriculture and land-based practices. She is deeply invested in methodologies and the ethics of friendship and vulnerability, approaching collaboration and placemaking as relational acts grounded in care, openness and attentiveness. Laura's work often reimagines byproducts, found archives and discarded materials, using them to question how we live with the remnants of our shared histories. Through the collaborative collective Still Moving, and in dialogue with academics and specialists from diverse disciplines, her expanded practice spans writing, conversation, film, performance, installation, and interdisciplinary exchange. So join me in welcoming Laura Hopes.
That sounds very, very serious. People who know me will maybe kind of question that, and I just wanted to say as well that I first met Sarah when I was in the first year of my degree across the road at the Arts University Plymouth when you were doing your teacher training, and that was in 2011, I think. So I've not always been an artist. I've come to it through quite a convoluted route. I never studied art at school, so I didn't do GCSE or A-level art. Because all of my friends were really good artists, so I was like, ooh, I'm going to do design technology. So I did design technology and really enjoyed that. And then I studied African literature and Swahili at University in London. And then as part of that, I met that wasn't part of the course, but I went to Africa and met the man who's now my husband, and ended up in Devon by mistake, as you kind of do, and realised there wasn't that much call for Swahili speakers. So I retrained as a primary school teacher and was a primary school teacher for 15 years. And during that time, it was in the Labour government, and there were lots of specialist teachers. And I went on a couple of courses by art specialist teachers, and I thought, this is great, I want to do this. I probably need some art qualifications, so I did a foundation course at Saltash part-time. And then when that finished, I was like, ooh, what should I do now? I came and started the degree at Plymouth University, and then carried on because it was really fun, did my MA, stopped primary school teaching because I managed to get a studentship for a PhD. So I basically did it all back to back, foundation, degree, MA, PhD, and then I taught at the university across the road until last year when they made all of their staff redundant. So I'm now carrying on my own research, doing bits of teaching like this. I really enjoy teaching, but actually having loads of time for my practice, which is really lovely, but financially quite precarious. So I'm really happy to, I don't know why I've given you my potted history, but I think I'm noticing that you're not all 18, and it's exciting to see that you can have a sustained practice at any age. And actually, while I was doing my foundation course, my dad came and did the foundation course a year after me, and he was 80 at the time. So that's a little start. But also because, like, a lot of the language Sarah's using is language that I use to describe my practice, and it sounds really, really serious. And it is really serious. A lot of the themes that I deal with are based around colonisation and climate change and activism, environmental activism. And they're really quite dark subjects. My aim has always been to try and, I'm quite a silly person inherently, as Paul know. And I think there are ways to activate audiences in ways that you can talk about these really horrendous things in a way that people feel like possibility is there. So that is probably the kind of really earnest aim under a lot of what I'm doing with my art. So I was saying to Sarah, I'm only talking about work from the last 2.5, 3 years, just because it's been quite a fruitful period for me. I think it's actually coincides with having a studio at Cast and trying to make time around that work. I do have a collaborative practice as part of Still Moving, which is quite different work. It is very much framed around environmental activism. So I have my own website, and that's the Still Moving website as well. So they are quite different bodies of work. So, just before I start, does anyone have any questions about any of the terminology that Sarah and I used to start off with? No? Okay. So this is a project that began back in 2023. The title of my presentation today is Bewilder, and it's really thinking about that notion of wilderness and wildness and what that actually means and how we have understood that culturally, particularly in the West, particularly in relation to landscape. I live in Tavistock. I've lived there for 25 years. I don't know why I find that important. There's a sort of sense of rootedness there. I'm starting to get a bit tired of living in Tavistock now, but there's something about that landscape that draws me. And when I first moved there, I moved from London to Tavistock, and I can remember wanting to feel like I knew the landscape in some way. Dartmoor I'm talking about in particular. And the way I started to know it was through being able to name its tors and go, oh, that's Coxtor, that's Pewtor, that's Great Mistor, almost like a kind of dot to dot of this landscape. And I started to kind of expand out through these tors like kind of concentric rings of understanding. And my first impressions of living on Dartmoor was that it was this wild landscape, that it was, untouched and bleak and this vast wilderness. And over time you realise that it's completely manufactured, completely and utterly. It was a tree-covered landscape at some point. It's not anymore. You can be right out in the middle of the moor and your foot can trip on a railway track and you're going, what is this here? You have these kind of strange signifiers that the landscape isn't wild. And so that's something that's really kind of preoccupied me is noticing these symbols within a landscape and what they do for us to understand it. So looking, thinking, noticing. None of which directly relates to what's on the screen, so I'm going to talk about this. So this is the starting point of a project called Cuckoo. So Edgar Chance was a very fancy Edwardian gentleman who decided that he was going to try and prove that cuckoos lay their eggs in other birds' nests. It had not been proven at this point. So he decided he was going to try and film this motion. And there's this incredible Pathé footage of him driving along in one of those kind of beautiful cars with this in the back, wobbling along. And then his menservant get out and they walk in that kind of funny film style, and they put it open and they lift it out and he steps in his incredible outfit. I doubt he actually stays in there and puts in the man hours as the filmmaker. I think it's probably more of a kind of symbolic role. But eventually, the footage is captured of a cuckoo laying its egg in another bird's nest. And I was really taken by the kind of the artifice of this, but also the idea of hiding in something so massively obvious, because it's literally like this giant kind of Easter egg that he's perched inside. And I was thinking about what must it feel like to be sort of sitting in there, looking, being invisible, but while at the same time being so incredibly visible. And obviously there are really clear metaphors about the cuckoo in terms of kind of human, particularly the global riches activity in the world, our extractive ways that we dominate other landscapes, essentially kicking out the eggs of other people. So I decided I wanted to make my own version of this. I wanted to have that experience of being inside that kind of cocoon. And I was lucky enough to be commissioned by Odd Arts Festival in Somerset, which kind of gave me the opportunity to do this. So I'd really recommend you keep looking out for opportunities where you can test stuff out, because I wouldn't have made this, I don't think, if I didn't have a deadline or the very small fee. I think I got 200 quid for this, which allowed me to buy the willow that constructed the shape and a massive bale of bracken from a local farmer. So the cuckoo hide had a little stool inside it, a copy of The Cuckoo's Secret and a sound piece that accompanied it. It's about 12 minutes long, and it's quotes from The Cuckoo's Secret by Edgar Chance, and it's a sound piece as well of me making kind of cuckoo sounds. So I think this is probably a really kind of a starting point in terms of my fascination with working with agricultural byproducts and waste materials. So where I live, bracken's really, really invasive, and the local farmers flail it and flatten it and then roll it up, and it can be used for animal bedding, but you know, it's really taking over certain areas of the moor. It's really fun to run through as well, so you get covered in ticks, but you know, I remember as a child kind of running around at Bracken. So it kind of set me off on this idea of working at scale and working with found materials. And just this autumn, Lara Goodband from RAM invited me to restage it at RAM, and it was really nice to kind of to have an opportunity to bring it back to life again, and to see it in a completely different context. I think here it felt quite like an expected item in that object. It didn't seem strange there. It kind of felt like it was inside this beautiful orchard. You sat inside it, it was summery, you could hear birds tweeting, you can kind of look out, you could hear me cuckooing in the background, it felt normal. Whereas here, it felt like this kind of strange heap that had landed outside the museum. And a kind of unexpected consequence of this was the poor gallery stewards had to take it in and out every day because it's really flammable. So for this iteration, it's on casters. It's on 8 casters, so it can kind of roll around now like a Dalek, which is quite fun. But they had this amazing like gallery cling film. I don't know if you've ever come across it. It's like that wide, and they wrapped the whole thing in it every night to move it in and out, and it made it loads neater, which I quite like. So it's kind of changed from this kind of like crazy like into this version. And it had a totally different kind of reception from visitors. This was from their CCTV. And I really enjoy this guy's expression of like coming down the stairs towards RAM. And I think for me, this really encapsulates something about the art that I make, in that it's really bloody difficult to explain to people who don't have an interest in contemporary art, like my in-laws, for example. That's their sort of like, why aren't you doing painting, you know? So I really enjoy having work in spaces where people can encounter it who might not like it or might question what it is about. But what you can't see is actually he was here with his little boy who'd climbed inside it, was having a lovely time. And that is another aspect that I really enjoy kind of going with. Like, I think probably, if I'm really honest, the thing that makes me excited about making art is quite a childish, you know, can I get inside it? Can I touch it? What's it? You know, that really like curiosity, that excitement, and that silliness. So I think, yeah, him and the little boy inside it are the kind of two sides that often come up in the art that I'm making. So this was a kind of continuation. You'll be surprised to hear I had loads of bracken left over. So I started kind of investigating some of these shapes. So the underlying shapes of these are a material that I haven't used that much because it's kind of gross. It's floristry foam, and weirdly there's a floristry foam factory outside Tavistock. And I went in there and said, are you chucking any away? And they went, yeah, help yourself. I've got some massive blocks of it that you'll see in the next couple of projects. But these are the kind of infill cutouts from kind of wreaths they make, and they have some other really amazing shapes from like when they do the letters for like mum and dad for kind of floristry displays for funerals and stuff. So it was just kind of thinking about these kind of iconic shapes, repeating patterns, but what happens with different materials and different textures. And it was also just a really nice flow activity to be doing in my studio. So I've really tried, Paul's my studio neighbour, I've really tried to not use my computer in my studio, which is really hard, isn't it? And just to have it as a space of making. And I really like activities that I can do without thinking. So I have quite a few various material projects that are just kind of rolling away, that I can have a podcast or an audiobook and just be like, la la la, and it's so like soothing and really nice to do. So here we've got bracken, we've got straw, we've got waste cane, like rattan cane or rushes. And the idea for the title, which is Bounders, came from these boundary stones. I don't know if any of you have ever seen these. This is up on Dartmoor, this is Pewtor near Tavistock. And around the Tor, there are several stones on the ground that have got these signs carved into them. And these signs designate that the Tor should not be quarried. So there's this kind of protective ring around the central stones of the Tor. You can quarry up to those, if you imagine this ring, but not within it. And this has kind of led me into thinking about how we value different things in nature, in landscape, in land. It takes me back to thinking about Dartmoor and knowing it through its tors. Like, we value tors quite a lot. They're kind of a natural capital, or a sort of a tourism USP of Dartmoor. Why do we value them so much? And clearly they've been valued for hundreds of years. People were like, no, we've got to keep these, even though we're quarrying all of this. So it's interesting to me, because a lot of the work I've done is about landscape appreciation through kind of romanticism and the sublime, and how we experience landscape, how we think about it, how it makes us feel, often leads to how we value it. Do I need to talk about the sublime at all? I'll do a little dive into the sublime. So the sublime, in its kind of aesthetic tradition, is around ways of experiencing landscape. So a really classic sublime would be the Caspar David Friedrich of The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, with his back to the painter on top of a mountain. Yeah.
It comes under awe.
Awe, exactly. Yeah. So it's that kind of feeling of something being beyond beautiful. It's a kind of beauty that is also a bit threatening. So the way I often think about it is, if you're stood on the edge of the cliff, you're having that feeling of vertigo, it's moving you in some way, but you're not actually in danger. You're very close to danger, but you're not actually in danger. So it's quite a controlled kind of, being a bit of an edgelord, I guess you could say, in nature. So I've never thought of that before, I'm going to keep that. So yeah, sort of like, you know, you can imagine the Victorians like, oh, a glacier, oh, you know, and going out and deliberately seeking that feeling in nature. And I'm quite susceptible to that, kind of like, wow, mountains and stuff. But my research has kind of uncovered to me that literally the historical time that the sublime was occurring was the kind of the very same time that we were, colonising. We had steam power, we were extracting from mountains. So at the very same time that we started to value a mountain, we also started to see it as, kind of material, like coal or minerals or ore. And so I feel like it's not a coincidence that this kind of like veneration of the natural world coincides with its utter destruction. And, you know, and that kind of really, really greedy and rapacious consumption of nature as a commodity, but also the people, the animals, the land that was destroyed in that as well. So it's kind of queasy for me, the sublime. I'm like, oh, I'm really drawn to it, but it's kind of gross at the same time. That was a long waffle. But yeah, these are things that I keep coming back to in my work, is kind of waste, consumption, landscape, wow, ooh, why do I feel like that? Any questions? I feel like I'm going blah, blah, blah. Okay. So these are kind of about this size. They're quite smelly. They are made with floristry foam blocks from a previous project and sheep's wool that I have gathered, some from the scrap store in Plymouth. If you don't know the scrap store, get there now. And some from a local farmer just up the hill from me in Tavistock. And this is the wool that he cannot sell. So basically it's the daggings. It's like the wool from like around the sheep's bum that you could, there's no like worth in processing. It's too expensive to process it. So he keeps the good stuff. Every now and then I go, oh, have you got a bag of daggings? And he's like, here you go. Gives me a dumpy bag of smelly wool that I come and torture my studio mates with. So again, this is another kind of, they take ages. So they're needle felted into the foam, and they've become these kind of friendly shapes that are kind of animal, but also kind of thinking about stone circles. I should have said that with relation to this. I'm always quite intrigued by the way the tour is circled, because Dartmoor's covered in kind of stone circles and hut circles. So there are definite sort of shapes and feelings and meanings that I keep coming back to. So I've got 6 of these. They kind of cluster. I quite like them on a shelf. They're kind of quite banal, just like oh yeah, like they're in a stock room or something. I quite enjoy that. But I've also quite enjoyed taking them out into the landscape. And here's my son pretending to be a young farmer. And I would really encourage you to take your work into different places to see how it behaves in different places. Like the cuckoo hide was very different in Exeter than it was in Somerset. These are very different in the studio as they are out in Dartmoor. And what I also really like is they were in exhibition in the Exeter Contemporary Open last year, and Matt Burrows, the curator, was like, "Ooh, what are we going to do if people touch them?" I was like, "Oh, that's all right. They're quite fixable. Like if any of the wool comes loose, I can just come along with my needles and do that, and they're fixable again." And I really like I came in one day and there was a little girl who's kind of like leaning on one, and I quite like that sort of that companionable feeling of them. And yeah, so I'm quite annoying to go on walks with because I'm always gathering stuff. So this is a piece that was up in the Studio Kind exhibition that Sarah had worked in as well in the summer, and I bought some of this felt from the scrap store. I don't know if you've ever seen it though, there's loads of it. And I think it's from kind of felted things that go on the bottom of chair legs to protect the floor from furniture. But I made the discovery that on a dog walk, I can normally gather about enough wool to fill a poo bag, and then a poo bag's worth of, a dog poo bag that is, a poo bag's worth of wool is about one of these. So it started to become like this kind of diary of dog walks. And I particularly enjoyed kind of like the paint that marks the sheep or bits of lichen that are gathered in it. So I'm always kind of looking for stuff in the landscape, looking to kind of think about how I understand it. And I know that sheep are really bad for the environment in Dartmoor because they eat everything before it gets a chance to kind of grow. So I know they're bad, but my dad was a sheep farmer, so I'm kind of have that like, oh, there's a sheep, oh, it's dead, or oh, it's stuck in a rock. I have that kind of friendship nature with sheep as well. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. And if anyone finds any ear tags from sheep, I'm collecting them. I don't really know what I'm going to do with them, but I'm interested in that idea of marking and naming, a bit like back with the boundary stone. How do we show ownership? Why do we feel like we need to show ownership? How do we value something? So I guess when I've got enough of these, there'll be some kind of collection that's interesting to do something with. So But this is a very different project. This is a kind of, this is a collaborative project that took place, it kind of grew out of a partnership with Catherine Earnshaw, who is a classicist at Exeter University. And I worked with her from about 2017 on a project called Marginalia, which was about fields and the margins of fields, and kind of thinking about the margins of pages, particularly in Latin and Greek hexameter poetry, which I still don't know anything about. I know a bit about, but that's her specialism. And she specialises in Virgil's poetry, particularly the Georgics. And the Georgics is it's a didactic poem, so it teaches you through the poem about how to be a farmer. So it was written in the Civil War, the Roman Civil War, and it's basically a manual for, there were thousands and thousands of soldiers roaming the landscape. They were like, oh shit, what do we do with them all? Let's get them farming. This is your manual for how to be a farmer if you haven't farmed before. So it's teaching you the basics like when to plant your vines, what to do if your sheep's got worms, blah, blah, blah. It's quite sort of boring stuff, but woven into it is this kind of philosophical treatise on how to be a good person at the same time. So again, it's kind of thinking about value, thinking about labour, thinking about the worth of labour. And in these ancient poems, they've been translated many times over many centuries. And you have a paratext. If you imagine the page, let's say this is the page, maybe that section would be the poem in the original Latin, and all around it you'd have this conversation, often arguments between different translators who translated things slightly differently. And I was really interested in this idea of the chorus being more important than what's in the middle, and kind of equated that to fields and thinking like quite often the middle of a field is a monoculture, whereas the hedges and the margins are quite interesting. Anyway, that was a project that we did then, which I'm not showing you, but we met up, we kept meeting, we kept talking, we kept thinking. Whenever we did talk, we were like, oh my God, we're brilliant, we're really making these amazing discoveries with this kind of arts, classics conversation. Why does this feel so fresh and new? And you have those moments when you're like, oh my God, we're amazing, and then the next morning you're like, okay. But actually, we realised that meeting on Dartmoor, talking and walking, thinking about land, value, was very much peppered with our own experiences and our friendship that was developing during this. And it felt very, very different to these kind of narratives of the sublime that I'd always come across, where it's usually, no shade, a white man looking out over something that he's conquered or he's planning to conquer. It's a very solitary experience. So while I still have that kind of like, oh, the sublime, I love walking up mountains, I enjoy that feeling, my reality is normally that I've got a child that needs a poo, or I've got to, the dogs run off, or something like that. It's much more everyday, it's much more banal, it's much more interrupted, and it's not normally by myself. It's normally with a friend or somebody. So it's a very different experience of landscape that I don't feel I necessarily encounter in literature about places that I'm interested in. So, I'm talking like a million miles an hour. We started thinking about how we could write together about our experiences of landscape. And moving on from the field, we started thinking about Dartmoor as this place that could contain our friendship, and particularly thinking about that idea of not just friendship with each other, but friendship as an interesting model for a relationship of humans to land. So rather than the sublime, which is quite a distanced, it's the edge thing, it's that distance worshipping, I'm very insignificant or I'm dominating. Could friendship be a more interesting way of exploring what our kind of relationship with land is? Could it be a more useful one in terms of kind of environmental activism or responses to climate catastrophe? And lots of our writing involved collage, lots of it involved kind of writing to and from each other. So this is a very literal example of us having a conversation through writing. Some of it came through collaging together. So one of us would take an image, one of us might do a screen print, one of us might draw into it, one of us might collage another image on top of it. And collage is quite a feminist act, I've discovered through researching its history. It's quite a good way of collaborating as well. It's an interesting way for me and for Catherine and I working together of accumulating lots of meanings to form a meaning beyond their separate parts, if that makes sense. So they don't necessarily need to communicate with each other, but together they form a kind of way of understanding something. So it's an interesting methodology that I keep working with. This was a project that I did last year with Louise, whose name's forgot. Our WhatsApp group is called the L's, so it's me, Louise, and Laura. I forgot. What's it? Louise Bell? That's it. Louise Bell and Laura Rosser. So we collaborated on a project that was centred at Maker Heights. I don't know if any of you have been to Maker Heights. I would urge you to go. Really interesting artistic community. Really interesting kind of military history, social history as a kind of place of holiday camps for city children. Alternative parties, kind of alternative ways of living. There's lots of kind of geodesic domes there. So we kind of used it as a research space. We went and had we had 3 different research trips there, which is basically us going there, having a nice meal in the canteen, which I recommend, going around for the day, taking photos, trying out artistic activities. And we would kind of set each other little challenges to do. So it'd be like, okay, we're going to make a 2-minute response to this and show each other. We're going to spend 10 minutes writing, and then we're going to share this. And I'm only showing you this, and I can't remember what the software was, but it's really amazing. It was like a research space where we could drop in. If anyone knows, please remind me, because it was really amazing, and I'd like to use it again. But it was just like this amazing blank canvas where we could collect together a lot of our research and our information. And then in the summer, we camped there for a couple of nights. And again, we kind of set ourselves this challenge of these things to investigate. One of which was kind of beating the bounds of the old kind of military, they're called redoubts. So I think there's 4 different redoubts around the perimeter of the site. But also investigating the kind of alternative shelters that come out through geodesic domes and the kind of, the Buckminster Fuller designs of geodesic domes, and how often they're used in alternative communities, either for like greenhouses or for communal accommodation, but also the kind of complexity of them geometrically and how hard they are to produce. And one of the challenges that we set ourselves was with a collection of scrap materials, which in this case were old tent poles, again from the scrap store, to construct a kind of impossible shelter, which we did without really talking and in less than an hour, and kind of instinctively working together. We did have a guy come over and go, "Oh, have you lost the instructions, ladies?" Which was kind of inevitable. But actually, it was kind of quite fitting, because Laura does a lot of stuff around kind of faulty instruction manuals, and so it was kind of quite fitting. Particularly, and I include this because watching Laura and Louise trying to put one of these pop-up tents back into its bag was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But we set ourselves the challenge of reconstructing this final shape in Grow Gallery, because we had a kind of residency exhibition there. And of course, it's absolutely impossible to do that again. And that's come up in a couple of different projects. But it was a really fun, light-hearted way of working. And I would really urge you, seek out residencies, seek out opportunities on platforms like Visual Arts Southwest, see if there are paid opportunities. But also, just do your own, literally go camping for a night, call it a residency, put it on your CV, you've got your first residency on there, because once you've got one, it makes it easier to get other ones. So you can call it a peer-led residency. There you go. So yeah, these were some of the kind of the fallout, not the fallout, the kind of ephemera from that project, and again turned into another studio displacement activity of, because I had so many of these. So these, by the way, are rattan blinds that I put through my bandsaw. So I've got hundreds of thousands of these little sticks, and I can happily spend a day with the glue gun just turning them into these kind of really big shapes. But I just really like the idea of impossible structures, thinking about shelters and forms, thinking at different scales. How am I doing for time? Doing all right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll be really speedy. Okay. This is a book I'm working on called Bog Witches at the moment. Thinking about bogs, thinking about women. In the narratives of Dartmoor, there are more narratives written by vicars than there are by women. So I'm really interested in Dartmoor, but again, it's like coming back to that idea of the sublime being one way of approaching landscape. Whenever I encounter women, they tend to be witches, crones, beautiful maidens that have been raped, dead maidens who've been raped, servants. Occasionally there's like a haughty landowner lady, but that's it, basically. And they're always kind of cursing people or luring nice young men into bogs. Equally, bogs on Dartmoor. We're starting to realise that they're incredibly valuable resource, natural capital, again, I keep sort of using these words, but also in terms of kind of carbon storage. And despite the fact that it seems to rain the entire time, these bogs are really degraded and they're not holding water in the same way that they should. So there's lots of downstream flooding. And this is a result of climate change, but centuries of tin streaming, which is very, if you imagine like the kind of Wild West Klondike gold panning, that's apparently what it was like. So people just digging, swashing, chucking it away, digging, washing away. So there's little heaps everywhere on Dartmoor. There's lots of gullies that have been artificially made that accelerate water runoff from the moors. Peat cutting for burning, for roofing your buildings, that kind of thing. And also loads of Victorian men really desperately tried to win favour with the royals by draining Dartmoor and calling it things like Princetown. You know, here you are, Prince, I made this town for you. You can definitely grow potatoes here, it'll be fine. You know, so women and bogs as these kind of irrational things that need improving are things that I'm interested in investigating on Dartmoor. And again, I'm showing more images while I'm talking about it. This is a working title. If anyone can come up with something better, please do tell me. I'm interested in mapping Dartmoor not through its tors, but through its bogs. So inverting that kind of hierarchy of knowing Dartmoor by its tors, but instead knowing it by its connective tissues and its bogs and its lowlands. Quick digression into land art. Nancy Holt was married to Robert Smithson, who was very famous land artist in the 60s and 70s, notable for the spiral jetty. And they came to Dartmoor in 1969, and they went to Wistman's Woods. And Nancy Holt's also very famous for large-scale land art. But I'm really intrigued that in this landscape, she started to notice these little orange markers that are on stone. So again, I'm thinking about bounders, that image that I showed you, how we notice a landscape, how we navigate it. And I'm really into land art, again, in that queasy way, that queasy relationship that I have with the sublime. It's quite often big dick energy of someone carving through a landscape and fucking it up, basically. It really is, though. Do you know what I mean? It's like, here I am. Poof. And Nancy Holt kind of did a not dissimilar thing as well. So I'm interested in, like, I'm really drawn to land art because it's got that, like, wow, but it's kind of awful and repulsive. So is there a way of making land art that is environmentally sensitive? I think there is. So I have recently started what will hopefully be a 2-year residency with the Southwest Peatland Partnership, sexy, I know, and they are rehabilitating lots of degraded bog on Dartmoor. So this is an aerial view of some of their work up at Torroyal near Princetown. And you can see here where the Victorians, bless them, really tried to drain this bog. And you can see here, this is water, these dark bits, where they've dammed up these kind of water courses that the Victorians dug to drain this land, and they're refilling with water. In about 5 years' time, these will be completely invisible because they'll be full of sphagnum moss, so it will look like bog again. But in the meantime, it's like, they're doing land art. They're doing massive land art. Oh my God. So I sort of said to them, did you realise you're doing land art? And they were like, well, we'll just make the holes where they need to be. I was like, oh, can I come and help? So hopefully I'm going to learn how to drive an amphibious digger, which will be really fun because they sometimes just kind of scoop out these holes with peat. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're going to let me do that. We'll see. But equally, on a smaller scale, I'm really interested in dealing with Millennia, which is like this kind of bog grass that's incredibly dry, covering the centre of Dartmoor, really flammable. So if you see like wildfires on Dartmoor, it's inevitably Millennia. It's kind of useless. You can't really do very much with it. Animals can't eat it because they're not out grazing on the moors at the time of year when it's edible. So it's a very short window in early March when it's green and not lignified, and after that they can't eat it. And it's so light, it doesn't, it just catches on everything, so it doesn't come into contact with the ground, so it doesn't rot. And so it's kind of this canopy that's stopping sphagnum moss from repairing this, repairing the peatland. And it's one of those things where a tiny switch in environmental management has had an unintended consequence. So it used to be that cattle and sheep were kept out on the moors all year round, in massive numbers. Masses of them died every year, and it was kind of just like an expected loss. You would lose loads of stock. As tourism increased on Dartmoor, people were like, oh, it's a shame there's all these dead animals here all the time, can you stop that? So they have grazing patterns where the animals are not out so much over winter, but it means that they're not able to eat the Millennia when it's edible. So it's kind of like this thing. Anyway, I checked with Southwest Peatland Partnership that it's okay to forage it, and they were like, oh my God, take as much as you want. Everyone will thank you for taking it. And I found out that if you coil it into a very basic, like a kind of cinnamon bun, it's heavy enough then to come into contact with the ground and it can rot. So it's a way of kind of using an artistic strategy, quite a basic artistic strategy, to make an environmental impact that is positive. And I'm currently working on an Arts Council bid, to see if I can fund my time with the Southwest Peatland Partnership to test this at scale. Because what I'd really love to do is, with collaborators, make a room-sized rug of it and document it, and it would disappear. It would be that opposite of the spiral jetty kind of thing. I'm just going to show you one more project, just really quickly, which is something that I've been doing at CAST, where I have a studio. Look out for the graduate residency opportunities at CAST every year. It's a great place to work. You've been there since the start, haven't you, Paul?
Just about it.
Yeah.
So.
So this year I was chosen by CAST to represent them as one of 16 organisations around the UK who had funding from the Gustav Metzger organisation to commemorate the 10th anniversary of his call for action to remember nature. So back in 2015, he, at a very advanced age, made these kind of calls around the world for people to stop and to remember nature on the 4th of November. And when Ben and Donna said, what do you want to do? I talked to them about the Millennia Project, but I also talked to them about this site, which is just opposite Plymouth College of Higher Education. It's the Brickfield site. And as I was cycling into Plymouth, I noticed kept noticing these scaffolding structures because I'm quite into scaffolding. Noticed they were quite interesting shapes, interesting that they're around all the trees in these kind of weird shapes. Might do something about that with my little sticks. And then I found out that I was just sort of thinking of the 2023 when the council cut down all the trees in Armada Way and thinking, oh no, they're going to do it again. They've put this scaffolding there because they're going to cut down these trees. It turns out they're there to protect the roots during the development. I think there's going to be astroturf there. So it just made me think about using this kind of civil infrastructure as a way, again, of drawing attention to something and thinking about protection and care of something through these quite, they're not like tender structures. So I worked with the children of High Street Primary School down in Stonehouse, and rather than using steel poles, I've used wooden poles with them. Taught them all how to use scaffolding clamps, which was really relaxing. And they started a project. This started in the summer. This was their first one of them working together to make these sculptures, to think about how we recognise, how we protect things. And the title, Functional Disobedience, is just thinking about that site where they had all the trees surrounded, had all these holes in the fences where people would be accessing nature. And I really wanted to think about nature not as this thing up on Dartmoor, but as this thing that we are, that is all around us, and how we access it. And sometimes you need to be naughty to access nature, and I think that's really important. So working with the children, we were part of the campaign. I'm next to Cornelia Parker, it's so exciting. I'm meant to be going up to London next Friday to appear alongside some of these artists in Tate Modern. Tate's going on strike, so I'm going to miss my one and only opportunity to be in Tate Modern. But it's been really, really phenomenal working with the school children on this. I've only just had a chance of playing with the equipment without 30 school children, and it is quite stressful. But they've been brilliant, and it's so lovely. This one of the girls' dads came up to me when she came home from school the other day, and she said, "I'm going to be a scaffolder when I grow up." And I was like, yes. And to hear them going, "Oh yeah, you don't want to swivel on that one, you want to double on that," and then working through it. They also made their miniature versions. I think 10 of them got glue gun burns. That was quite stressful, but. I really enjoy working with other people because I think the structures that they came up with, I wouldn't have come up with. The chaos that they came up with and were like, yeah, let's do this, was so exciting. And I think it goes back to that kind of silliness and joyfulness that I think you can bring into your work, and for me is really important. So this was the last slide I'm going to show you. So this is it installed down in Back Lane West in Redruth. I did this on Monday, and this is the first time I've actually got a chance to play with it by myself, and it's been really fun to know that it's not going to fall on a child's head and to try and fill the space. So yeah, I think that's it, Sarah.
Really great. Thank you so much. We've got time for like a couple of questions, if anybody has any questions for Laura.
There was one, a picture that you just skipped over. I think it was just when you were talking, that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you didn't.
No.
Was that part of the bulk witches?
Yeah.
Part of the...
So this is me trying to think about making different types of maps, and again working with agricultural waste material. So this is the kind of material that you wrap gammon in when you buy it in the supermarket, and just sort of thinking about how can you make. I guess it kind of comes on from impossible structures, but also like how can you make impossible maps in a way? How can you map the bits that people normally don't think about, like the bogs or that. But also kind of thinking about female labour and sewing and weaving and holding things together. And also I kind of realised that I'm making lots of containers that are full of holes, and I don't really know what that means. It might not mean anything, but it's kind of like, why do I keep doing things that deliberately doing things that I know don't work, like making impossible structures. So yeah.
What were those ones made from?
So that's more of the felt,
Oh, right, okay.
and that is kind of like a gauzy net curtain material. But yeah, I'm not sure about them. And then this is a project. My son is really into caving, and he keeps taking me in caves and mines. So I'm sort of slowly working on a series of thinking about spaces that you don't normally see, and the colours of the minerals that were inside the mines, kind of reflecting them in a kind of curtain at the entrance of the mine, and thinking about that as a portrait of the mine. Not sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got another question.
Go for it.
So you went to art school not at 18,
Yeah.
and then this is something I was talking to a graduate of the fine art course last year. We were talking about like if you're starting as an artist in late middle age, you've got that much smaller amount of time to kind of I guess present yourself or kind of be taken seriously
Yeah.
or whatever. So just how long has it been for you to go from then kind of education to being in this place now where you're able to apply and be
I think I applied for stuff.
take one when it's shut.
I think I applied for stuff all the way through, actually. So
Yeah.
even in, I think even in the third year of my degree, I was applying for stuff, and then other students were putting on stuff. So we would put on like pop-up shows and stuff. So it's just because it's really embarrassing, your CV at the start. It's really thin, and then it's like, so you're kind of putting everything you possibly can into it. So I would just try and, like, even if it's a day that you're showing stuff, even if it's in your front room that you're showing stuff, it just starts to accumulate, and the more you have, then the easier it is when you do come to apply for things. But definitely look at like AN, I would really recommend, Axis Web, Visual Arts Southwest. There are loads and loads of opportunities there. The landscape is getting harder, I would say. But I do loads of stuff for free, which is really hard.
We had a talk with Dan Halbert,
Yeah.
and he was talking about how he's got 4 jobs now. So
Yeah.
he curates, he said he writes catalogue entries for artists and charges 200 quid each.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like how do you support yourself? Do you just have to kind of prostrate yourself and go, right, I'm going to live in a shed
hustling all the time. Like, I'm working on 2 applications at the moment. I don't know if either of them will come off, but they take a lot of time to apply for. Like, I'm doing a collaborative project with Low Profile, Hannah Rose and Rachel Dobbs, as part of the See for Yourself programme through the Plymouth Sound National Marine Park, where we're asking people to show us their tattoos to show their relationship to the sea. And it's such a good project. We're getting such amazing stuff. But we worked out it's a tiny pot of money, and for the amount of hours we're doing, we worked out the other day we're getting £6 an hour for that. And it's just like, you know it's a good project, so you do it, but it's like, okay, I'm going to need to find a way to support this. So, it's hard. I've got a little redundancy pot because I got made redundant last year from the university, so it's kind of bought me this year to go, I'm going to do my practice, which does feel like a luxury, but it's also like, the countdown clock of like, oh. Yeah.
And have you approached kind of like have you had like a career strategy in, I guess, in becoming an artist, or is it been more organic?
I think there are definitely people who I saw and I thought, ooh, how did you get there? What did you do? So I guess I was a little bit strategic. So I remember joining an organisation called Visual Arts Plymouth after the first Plymouth Art Weekend when was that, 2015 or something?
17.
Yeah, and joining that because there were people who
15, you're right.
Yeah, people who I was like, wow, I really like them and their work. I'm going to see if I can join that steering group. And like stuff like that, I guess I did. it wasn't as kind of hard-headed as that, but you do start to know people and people start to know you. I think be generous and nice. Like, there's not that many opportunities. Like, even if you were like, I really want this one for me, still send it out to your network and go, guys, there's this, because other stuff will come back. So there's no point being selfish with things, because when you get chosen for something, it's so arbitrary. People will just choose it because they like that project, and they will reject yours just because the other one they like more. It's not because they don't like yours. So it's kind of, I think it's a sort of confidence in being yourself and being kind of friendly. And I think it might be different. Like, all of my art career has been centred in Plymouth, so that's all I know. I know the Plymouth art world. I don't really know. I would imagine in London it's really cutthroat and really schmoozy, but here, after a while, you know everyone after 5 years, don't you? And if people know that you're nice and you'll turn up and you'll work, then they start, you know, I feel like they'll start asking you to do stuff. So it's not very helpful.
No, thank you. Thanks for everything. Thank you.
We've got one more question. Do you want to?
Hi.
I'm interested in promoting self-residency. And you said it's useful on your CV. I hate camping.
You don't have to camp.
So I'm just trying to get the practical process for that. So do I have the project in my mind first and do the experimentation? That's basically what it is, isn't it?
I mean, I would say if there are people who like, so Laura and Louise and I were like, oh, we keep noticing that we're interested in certain themes. Our practice is really different, but we keep talking about like boundaries and care and error, let's say. Those are things that cross over. We all did a PhD at the same time, so we were kind of aware of each other's practice, but you'll all be aware of each other's practice as well. So it might be like, this person is really into what I'm in, and it, you know, you could go and rent a B&B, you could stay in a, you know, bunkhouse on Dartmoor, you could do it in your house. You know, it doesn't need to be somewhere else, and it could be as little as like we all go for a walk together once a week. So it could be like a self-led research group or a self-led residency, or, you know, that kind of thing. So it's just being a bit canny about kind of, you're creating your networks now, and other people come into those networks and you'll go, oh, this person's really great, or have you read this? This would be really good. It could be that you like all promise to watch a film that you've all talked about, and then you talk about it afterwards. So it could, you know, these kind of informal things, you can describe them in a way that kind of sets you up to be able to access more of them without lying.